Okay, so we've been looking at objects that can hold lots of different data, and we can even kind of do programming on them as well using methods. So there's a couple of ways that we can create objects. Just looking back, we can say const my object equals, and then we can create our object here. But what if we want multiple objects of the same kind of type, but that hold different data? So for example, we could have a whole class of students that all have similar data and similar methods, but we wouldn't want to write those out every single time for, say, a class of 30 people. Well, what we can use is something called classes. And classes are object factories. So what we can do here is we can create objects many times over using classes. So for instance, let's make an animal class. We've got a zoo of animals, or a small petting zoo of animals, and we want to create an animal. We want to create many animals. So the easiest way that we can do this is we can literally just say class animal, and you'll notice that I've used an uppercase A here. Now, you can create your classes with lowercases. However, convention says that we should use uppercase sentence cased. Title cased class names. And also when we come into React, you actually have to in some instances. So we say class animal, and then we can just add a space and add some curly brackets. Now in here, we've created our class. There are some other things that we need to do in here for it to be useful, but we do have a class of animal now. So let's just note down some of the things that we want to do on our animal objects once they're created. Well, we'll want a animal type. Let's create a animal name as well. And let's also say that they should introduce themselves. Fantastic. So let's have a look at just these first two here, saving properties onto our animal object. So the way that we do this is using a constructor method. And what does that look like? Well, because we're constructing objects using our class, we can simply write this. We can say constructor, and then we need some parentheses, and then some curly brackets afterwards. We can actually pass properties and we can pass arguments into our constructor here. So what we want to pass into our animal object when they're constructed is their type and their name. So the way that we can then create these objects with these types and names that we're going to pass in, we would use this dot and then think of a property name that we want to have on our object. So we will say this dot type is equal to, and we will set that to the type that we put in here. Let's do that again with our name. So we'll say this dot name is name. Now, just to kind of prove this, let's actually just change one of these. So what we'll do is we'll say this dot breed rather than instead of this dot type. So what will happen here is we will get objects that have a property of breed on them, and it'll be whatever we've passed in as the type here. Okay, so let's take a look at how we actually construct a new animal then. So all we have to do is we'll save this in a variable. So we'll say const my dog. For example, you can choose any animal that you like. And we will say new animal. So this will create a new animal object and save it into the myDog variable. We need some parentheses after here to pass in whatever we want to pass to our constructor method here. So I'm going to say the type is a, I don't know, Saint Bernard, and its name is Goofy. I don't know. Just think of a fun name for your animals. Okay, so let's go ahead and simply just console.log out my dog. So if I save this now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open my index.html with live server. Of course, I'm using the starter code that's available in the lesson, but you can construct this yourself if you would prefer. So let's open the console. Fantastic, we've got our animal, and you'll see here that we've got our breed of St. Bernard and our name of Goofy. Fantastic. And because this is just an object, we can access all of those and as this is just an object, we can access all of those properties in the same way that we can with any object. So we could say mydog.breed here. Save this, have a look over here. Brilliant, and we've just got St. Bernard there. Wonderful. So how do we now put our own methods on our classes? Well, it looks very similar to the way that we might do it with objects, to be honest, if we were just using object methods. So under here, I can say, for example, introduce. So they're going to now introduce themselves. We add some parentheses afterwards, and then some curly brackets. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to say console.log hi, or I'm going to say, hi, I am a then, and you'll notice I'm using backticks here, so I'm using template literals, and then I'm going to insert this dot breed, and my name is this dot name. So let's call down here that introduce method on the myDog object. So we'll say myDog.introduce. We'll need some parentheses. If I save this now, fantastic, we get, hi, I am a St. Bernard and my name is Goofy. Wonderful, although I think Goofy was actually a Great Dane. Doesn't matter for the purposes of this. Fantastic. So this is how we can create new objects from our classes. So of course we could say const my cat here equals new animal, and this is an orange cat because I know nothing about cats, and its name is Oscar. Of course, choose your own breeds and names for your animals there. So of course we're just saying console.log mydog.breed and mydog.introduce. hence why we only get those here. But if we now say my cat dot introduce, we save that, you'll see that we've written our class once, but we're able to create multiple objects using it. Fantastic. So we've got our outputs there. Okay, so we've got our animal class now. We can also add, that's kind of a parent class. That's kind of our top level class. All animals will have a breed and a name, and they can introduce themselves. But what if we wanted to be a bit more specific later on? Well, we've made our parent. Now what we can do is we can make children, or we can make child classes. So let's have a look at how this works in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duck, for example, that is the only thing in the animal kingdom, I think, that can say quack. So what we'll do is we'll say class duck extends our animal class. And what we're doing is here, we're kind of saying, go and do everything, make available everything on the animal class, but we're going to stick a bunch of stuff on the bottom of it. So we'll need a constructor, again, because we're still constructing our objects. So we'll say constructor. And we will need to pass in some data. And we're going to pass in kind of the type and the name again. So we'll say name, type and name. And then we add our curly brackets afterwards. So the thing is, though, what we need to do is we need to kind of give this name and type to our parent class, our animal class. And the way we do that is with super. And basically what this is going to do is it's almost a little bit like us saying new animal and then passing in the type here. It's kind of a bit like doing that. So we'll say super type and name. So this is going to kind of give the type and the name that we pass into our animal class here. Great. So if we now just say const my duck equals new duck, and we open some brackets there, and we add a type. I know nothing about ducks, but we'll say this is a mallard, and its name is Susan. Good name for a duck. And then we console.log out my duck and save this. You'll see that we've got our duck, which has a breed of mallard and the name Susan there. Fantastic. Now let's go and have a look at something here. So we'll say my duck, dot introduce. Now you'll notice that we don't have an introduce method on our duck, but if I save this, you'll see that we're still able to use all of the methods that we had up here on our animal class. We can then add things down here onto our duck class. So I'm going to say quack, and we'll add parentheses and curly brackets. And here all we'll do is we'll say console.log quack, quack. So if we save that now and we call upon myduck.quack, you'll see that we now have not only the access to all of the methods on our parent class, but also methods on our child class. Now let's just prove that this is working in this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my cat dot quack. And if I save this now, you'll see that we get an error because that quack method is not on my cat. It doesn't exist on that animal class up here, so we cannot use it. However, we've gone ahead and put it down here on the duck class. Now, as I say, don't worry too much if this doesn't make too much sense to you right now. We will have plenty of practice. What I want you to take away from this is that we can use classes kind of like an object factory. We can use them to create objects. And we can also extend them to add kind of functionality or more properties to more specific children of that parent class.